Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be featuring the Marceau, a ship that was recently added to the armory, a tier 10 French destroyer. The matchmaking is full tier 10 with some rather nasty opposition like Daring, Smolensk, Venezia and so forth. Luckily this game has no carrier, but then again Marceau actually has pretty decent AA, so it's one of the few DDs that does somewhat decently against CVs. By no means immune of course, but with defensive AA and sector reinforcement it can put up a fight much like the Holland can. Before I start though, thank you guys for all the subs and the support, I do really appreciate it. And of course, as some of you predicted, I ended up enjoying the Eger, so the very next day after I posted my vid about enjoying the Eger, Wargaming announced that they were nerfing the secondaries. The reload was nerfed from 3.1 to 3.6 seconds. Someone calculated it was something like a 14% DPM nerf on those secondaries, so I guess that's what I get for enjoying German ships, and not allowed. They also ended up buffing the Nevsky, Alexander Nevsky, which is extremely baffling because that's a ship I thought was very powerful. They buffed the Sigma from 2.0 to 2.05, basically a small accuracy increase. And one of the few things that I felt like was keeping that ship from being completely ridiculous was that poor dispersion, and now they buffed that, so I guess I gotta feature a vid on that ship quite soon. They also added German carriers, which is extremely debatable with AP rockets, but we haven't gotten to test them yet, so a bit too early to call on those. Moving on, the Marceau. It's basically a Kleber hull, in the sense that it is of course stupidly fast. You got the same 21.9k health with expert marksman, oh sorry, not expert marksman, survivability expert adding that health. Well, you can get it up to 225.9, but very tanky, and the turning circle is 740, not that good. But then on the other hand, you got a 4.6 second rudder shift, which means you can run the acceleration module. The ship itself does 44 knots even without the speed boost, so obviously, actually sorry, 46.2 knots just with the flag, and then if you add the speed boost on top, you're of course breaking past 55 knots. So the ship is absolutely stupidly fast, and it has defensive AA, unlike the Kleber, but that's kind of when the playstyle and the similarities between these two ships end. The guns on the ship are basically the Colbert guns. To put it simply, they have a base reload of 3.5, which is pretty much I think half the reload of the Kleber guns. But the ballistics are vastly different. Whereas the Kleber has 139mm guns, this thing only has 127mm guns. And the default range is only 11.5, which means AFT for range at this point 13.8k range is practically mandatory. The turret traverse is of course much nimbler, much faster, and the guns in general handle better, faster reload, faster turret traverse, but the major downside is in the shell velocity, something I will be talking about a lot here, but you can already see at this, the more distance I create between myself and the Goliath, you see how quickly that shell timer next to my cursor, you see how quickly it increases as I create distance. That becomes very absurd very quickly. The DPM on the Marceau is basically almost pretty much twice the DPM of the Kleber. But of course Kleber does have access to main battery reload booster, and it has access to those fast, great ballistics on the guns with great AP pen. So Kleber can still match the DPM on this thing. However, with Concealment Expert and the full stealth build, you can get this ship down to a 7km concealment. Obviously 7km concealment is not enough to actively really contest other DDs, but if you do get to fight them, this thing shreds. The HE DPM is 254k, which is actually the highest, and of course you build it for guns, which will you bump it up even further. But the base DPM, or even the buff DPM, is the highest. You beat the Haragumo, you beat the Daring. No one competes with HEDPM. In this case, I do load AP because there is a cover, and Kaba has that 50mm plating and is giving me a lot of broadside, and you can see that I'm managing to make this AP arm on that Kabarov's broadside, and I'm doing a significant amount of damage to him. But as soon as the distance becomes greater, you see how hard it is to actually land these shells. He has no issues landing shells on me, even with my speed, but you really struggle to land any of your shells on him. Penetration-wise, the Marceau is right below the Grozovoi, far below the Kleber, of course. The further the distance becomes, the more it drops. In fact, at 10 km and further, the AP penetration actually drops below the Kama. And I think at 20 km, actually no, it stays there. So you go from being third best below the Grozovoi to dropping to being fourth best once you go past 10 kilometers. So the AP penetration isn't really that special. If you use the Grozovoi and Kaba AP pen, you know what I'm talking about. Good against broadside battleships, but unlikely to score citadels unless fairly close to the target. So nothing like the Kleber's capacity of just farming at range. Fire starting capacity is quite good. In fact, if you're spamming a target with the full HE build, you end up starting fires fairly quickly because of the amount of shells you're landing. The issue is, of course, if they maneuver, if they dodge, if they're fast, it's very difficult to consistently keep your guns on the target. You can see already how much I have to zoom out and how much I have to lead. The air drag on these shells is just obscene. And this is just 10 kilometers away. And at this 10 kilometer range, you can see that I'm actually getting a fair bit of damage back from the secondaries alone. And it's hard for me to really understand why they felt like this ship needed to be added to the game. It's kind of like a really mobile, really annoying HE spammer. And I don't think the Marceau is particularly fun to play either, because you lack any of Kleber's oomph capacity and that amazing ambush capacity, HE burst, AP burst. You lack all that. You're kind of just a really annoying, kind of hard to play, hard to aim HE spammer that struggles to get much else done besides farming damage on slow and sluggish targets like BBs. You do occasionally get to ambush DDs like I did on the Kaba, and when you do, you of course shred them quite quickly, but that's mostly because they misplay, they misposition. Against good players, the Marceau really struggles to have much of an impact, because if they just play safe, they angle, you basically have to climb a 1 kilometer gap. You have to close that 1 kilometer gap to get them within gun range. And even then, they can just kite you towards their own ships. And you, of course, you lack any sort of heal, you lack any sort of smoke. So life becomes fairly difficult. It does have a different type of torpedo, in the sense that the Marceau torpedoes are actually 9 kilometers of range. And they hit for, I think, something about 15k damage, but they only do 60 knots. So you don't have Kleber's amazing torpedoes, YOLO torpedoes either. The idea is, of course, with this 9km torps and your 7km concealment, you can do a bit of stealth torping, but let's not pretend like 9km torpedoes at tier 10 are particularly impressive, especially with that 60 knots of speed. Well, okay, to be fair, you are running the module, so you get it up to 63, but they hit for 14.8k, that's how much damage they did. They are quite stealthy, they are quite hard to dodge, and if you get to basically play free farm DD on a flank and a battleship is pushing in towards you, they are very effective. You drop both sets of torps, you wait to score a torpedo hit or two, cause a flooding, and then you open up and start HE spamming. But in playstyle, it's not really anything unique. It's not really anything special. It's not something we haven't seen before. And ultimately, my issues with the Marceau is it always feels like a struggle to play. I don't think the ship is weak. I think it's quite strong, but I don't think it's as strong as the other DDs. The other tier 10s, like something like a Daring, it doesn't need agility and speed because it has smoke, much better torpedoes, and just raw firepower and great concealment, which allows it to trade. And Marceau is, it's kind of like, well, it's a mix of Colbert and Kleber, but it doesn't have the overwhelming firepower of the Colbert, and it doesn't have the ambush capacity or the fun playstyle of the Kleber either. So it really feels like a bastard child of Colbert and Kleber, and I've never really found it that fun to play. I ended up playing this thing quite a lot. They had a few buffs, a few nerfs. They tweaked the DPM output and they fiddled with it to get the values where they were happy with it, but ultimately it's not something that you can't experience with the Kleber and have significantly more fun with the Kleber as well. Goliath pops around. The torpedo angles are pretty good, keep that in mind. I'm really making sure I land those perfect torpedoes. Using AP, of course, if he's getting this much broadside, but will he die to those? As I said, the torpedo alpha isn't really that impressive. We land 2. Are we gonna get a third? Only 2 torpedoes. He manages to dodge the other ones. The downside, of course, of the only 60 knot torpedoes shows up. Launch some preemptive torps in case he's pushing through the gap, but it doesn't look like he is. He just stops. I think he actually grounded behind the island. The YOLO potential, it does not feel. If, for example, a Kleber in that same position, he could have even AP Citadel and just straight up killed that guy. I tried to track the torpedo. It's a bit buggy in replays. I have a hard time, and now that the final cost of this ship has been published, it's what, 248k? I think it's 248k coal. So why would you spend that coal on this thing? Especially when there are some really fun ships like, for example, Thunder or Georgia. These are really, really fun coal ships that you could be spending your coal on. Why would you spend it on this thing? It's another HE spammer, this time in DD form. Amusingly, it feels like a lot of these new lines are very much creeping in on Khabarovsk role, the thing that made Kaba kind of stand out. And they try to tweak it a bit. They give it speed, they don't give it the armor, but we keep him, and they don't give it the heal and so forth. But it still feels like it's that same tired old Kaba gameplay, just in a slightly different form. And it's really not that engaging. This team, of course, is, despite my best efforts to try to pick up kills, try to have an impact left, right, and center, my team is, of course, dying like flies, left, right, and center. This has been very evident lately, especially, well, the corona situation hasn't exactly alleviated the level of play we've been seeing lately. It's very much steamrolls, it feels like, all the time. Either you're on the winning side or you're on the losing side, but regardless, the close games are very, very rare indeed. We're actually only down to 3 ships at this point, so this is turning out to be quite a brutal game. I launched my left side, I want to launch the other side as well. My speed boost ran out and I'm pretty low on health. So we're gonna see if we can maybe turn around, drop some torps and maybe ambush the Kaba as well. The 7k in concealment does give you some ambush potential against the other gunboats. But for example, I'm not sure if you really want to ambush a Harugumo, because he basically matches your DPM, but he also has a smoke. And if he smokes up when you take the fight, you, even despite your great DPM advantage and your maneuverability, that's a fight you can easily end up losing. Taking some chip damage on the Kaba, trying to lob shells around the island. Looks like he will be dodging them, might even spot them for the Kremlin, sadly. The Kaba is pushing up, so we're going to turn the other way. This is, of course, the advantage, though, or the Kleber, that fast turret traverse. And one other thing is, of course, the amazing AA. But still, is it enough? Takes for down. AP volley catches the Kaba. I slow down enough between shooting him that I remain undetected, so the Kremlin can't take shots at me. And I'm gonna see if I can just rush down this Kaba, because, well, we've lost all caps, we're down to 3 ships. I need to do something very desperate indeed. The Kaba pops up. I have to take a significant lead to hit him. Even at 5 kilometers, the lead you have to take is quite absurd with these slow guns. I damage con the turret to get that extra DPM to kill him ASAP. And I do manage to finish him off, but he does set a fire, so this is going to be the end of the story here. I'm gonna see if I can maybe get some put the island between me and them, but my teammate ends up dying, so before I can do any sort of YOLO maneuvers, the game ends. Marceau. 152,000 damage, not that special. It was a fairly short game, but it did show some of the strengths. Good when you get to ambush other DDs, but the lack of torpedo speed and power, you do spam them out fairly quickly. I think, in fact, let me double check in the Torpedo DPM, the Marceau does do fairly well. If you get to use both sides on cooldown, you basically match the torpedo power of the Daring. Oh no, you actually beat it if you get to do them, launch them both all the time. You get very close, in fact, to Hayate's torpedo power, and I think you might get close to Gearing. Yeah, you almost match Gearing's torpedo. That is torpedo DPM, if you launch both sides all the time. But obviously, in real-world situations, you like the range, and you like the huge spreads, and you like the torpedo speed, and you like a lot of things. So in actuality, you never get really close to any sort of gearing output. Still, 3 torpedo hits. We did get a few in. 5 fires, not that many. You can get more in this thing, obviously. Team score-wise, 1.4k. Not that much, but this was once again the classic steamroll where most of the game earns 500, 600, 700 base XP and just gets completely rolled over. We've seen a lot of these games lately. It's getting to the point where I'm honestly a bit worried if Wargaming doesn't need to do something about it, because it's getting so very one-sided. Detailed report-wise, well, we did shoot a bunch of shells. 269 hits out of 608 HE, a bunch of AP, some torps, some fires, not that much. You can absolutely get higher damage games like this. And then this. If you happen to play on a flank where the enemy battleships are pushing, you drop some torps, you get a few fires, you can easily rack up the damage. But is it the type of gameplay that I would consider worth spending coal on? No. No, honestly, like even the small, at least the small one offers some unique gameplay with that radar heal, 30% speed boost. Like there's something unique going on there. There's something special. But this is just another HE spammer in the form of and of course Småland has those fast torpedoes. So between the Marceau and the Småland is far more unique. This thing just feels like, well, they took the Colbert guns and put them on a Kleber hull. And then they were like, well, let's put this in the store for coal. And yeah, this ship doesn't have a whole lot going on for it. If you have to spend coal, if it's burning a hole in your pocket, and you already have all the cool ones like Georges, and you have the Thunderers, and maybe even the horrendous Smolensk, if you have all of this one, then get the Småland. Don't get the Marceau. This, I don't really see any point in this one. And yes, the AA might seem strong, but as the game goes on, or even if it's just a good carrier focusing you, he will be able to shred you. Because even with that full stealth build, Marceau's plane spotting range is actually 3.9 kilometers. So it means that you're very, very easy to spot. And of course, if you are gunboating on a flank and the planes pop up before you can stop shooting and go dark, your defensive AA most certainly will not stop those rocket planes from absolutely shredding you. So there's a fair bit of downsides to this ship, and honestly not too many upsides. It's a fast Dakka boat, and that's pretty much it. I personally think the Kleber is a ton more fun than this one. In fact, when we had this ship available for testing, I usually ended up playing the Kleber more than this thing, because at least with the Kleber you can have fun with the AP, whereas Marceau AP, well, it's like Kaba AP. It's decent, but it's not going to win any prizes. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. Alright, as usual, let me start with the modules. Consumables wise, not much to talk about. You run premium damage con, premium speed boost, premium defensive AA, in that order. Upgrade wise, turret torpedo survival, improved speed boost if you don't have one, engine room, faster torpedoes because the other ones are basically useless for your build, faster acceleration because your rudder shift is fast enough to allow it, concealment expert, and faster reload on the main guns. Additional range, I've tried it. Honestly, you struggle to hit things at 13.8. Adding more range to it, there's no point. You don't benefit at all. Captain build wise, if you have a Bonnier, I do recommend him. Priority target, last stand, survivability expert, concealment expert. After that, build a BFT. I would say AR and then EFT. I guess you can go AFT before them, but the extra range, even though it seems like the basic range of 11.5 is so anemic, you even at 13 kilometers, good luck hitting anything besides BBs. or maybe like nose in Moskvas or something similar. I did manage to farm down a nose in Stalingrad at one point, but it really is a struggle. And if he started accelerating, when he started reversing and accelerating, he was actually juking some of my shells. That's how poor the shell velocity on these things is. Flag wise, speed, detonation, faster consume, not that important actually. I would go with AA, fire chance, and flooding chance, and then maybe November Foxtrot. Those are the base flags. You can run reduction in fires if you would choose, but the difference isn't really that large because fires are very short duration on a DD. Still, it doesn't exactly hurt. Anyway, that was my Marceau commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and as always, thank you guys for subscribing. I am grinding towards that 100k subs to give you guys a huge giveaway, so thank you very much for all your support, and I will talk to you guys next time.